Have you ever noticed this? You scroll on Instagram or TikTok for hours, you buy something new, you eat your favorite food. For a moment, it feels amazing. You feel excited, energized, motivated. But then, a few minutes later, you feel empty, unmotivated, almost bored with life. And you start asking yourself, why do I need more and more just to feel good? Most people think the answer is dopamine. They believe dopamine is the happiness hormone. But according to neuroscientist Dr. Andrew Huberman, that belief is completely wrong. Dopamine does not create happiness. Dopamine creates desire. It drives you to want more, chase more, and keep going. Today, we're going to break down what dopamine really is, why too much of it can make you miserable, and how understanding dopamine can completely change the way you work, learn, and live your life. What is dopamine? Most people hear the word dopamine and immediately think of one thing: happiness. They say things like, social media gives me dopamine, chocolate gives me dopamine, dopamine makes me feel good. But this is one of the biggest misunderstandings in modern neuroscience. According to Dr. Andrew Huberman, dopamine is not the happiness hormone. Dopamine is a neuromodulator. That means it doesn't just make you feel something, it changes how your brain functions. At its core, dopamine is the chemical of motivation, drive, and pursuit. Dopamine is about wanting, not having. Here's the key idea you need to understand. Dopamine is released most strongly before you get a reward, not after. Dopamine rises when you anticipate something, when you expect something good to happen. That's why dopamine is often called the chemical of wanting, not liking. Let me give you a simple example. Think about ordering food online. The moment you place the order, you feel excited. You imagine the taste. You check the delivery status again and again. That excitement, that anticipation, that's dopamine. But once the food arrives and you eat it, the dopamine actually drops. The pleasure you feel while eating comes mostly from other chemicals, not dopamine. Dopamine pushes you forward. Dr. Huberman explains that dopamine evolved to help humans survive. Thousands of years ago, dopamine helped us hunt for food, explore new environments, find mates, build tools and shelters. Without dopamine, humans would not move, explore, or improve. Dopamine answers one powerful question in the brain: is this worth pursuing? If dopamine is high, your brain says, go, try, keep pushing. If dopamine is low, your brain says, stop. This isn't worth the effort. Stay where you are. So dopamine is not about comfort. It's about action. Dopamine and effort. Here's something very important Dr. Huberman emphasizes. Dopamine is tightly linked to effort. When you do something hard, exercise, study, build a business, learn a skill, dopamine helps you stay engaged. Not because it feels amazing, but because your brain believes the effort will lead to something meaningful. That's why people with healthy dopamine systems can work long hours, delay gratification, stay focused on long-term goals. They don't feel happy all the time. They feel driven. Dopamine does not mean satisfaction. This is where many people get trapped. Dopamine does not create long-lasting satisfaction. In fact, high dopamine often comes with restlessness, craving, a feeling of not enough. Have you noticed this in your own life? When dopamine is high, you don't say, I'm content. You say, I want more. More content, more success, more stimulation. That's why dopamine, when misunderstood, can actually make people feel less happy, not more. Dopamine sets your baseline. Another critical concept from Dr. Huberman. Your brain has a dopamine baseline, a normal level that determines how motivated and energized you feel every day. When you spike dopamine too high, too often, through social media, junk food, and constant entertainment, your baseline drops. That means normal life feels boring. Simple tasks feel exhausting. Motivation disappears. You don't lose happiness, you lose drive. And without drive, life starts to feel empty. The big takeaway? So let's summarize this clearly. Dopamine is not happiness, is not peace, is not contentment. Dopamine is motivation, desire, forward movement, the fuel for effort and progress. When used correctly, dopamine helps you build an incredible life. When misunderstood and overstimulated, dopamine keeps you chasing, scrolling, consuming, but never truly satisfied. And in the next part, we'll look at real-life examples that show how dopamine is hijacked in the modern world and why so many people feel motivated but unhappy at the same time.
Easy to understand examples of dopamine. Now that you understand what dopamine really is, not happiness, but desire and motivation, let's look at how dopamine actually shows up in everyday life. Because dopamine is not something abstract, it controls your behavior every single day, often without you realizing it. Example 1. Social media and endless scrolling. Let's start with one of the most powerful dopamine machines ever created: social media. When you open TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube Shorts, your brain doesn't know what it's going to see next, and that uncertainty is the key. Dr. Huberman explains that dopamine spikes highest when rewards are unpredictable, not when they're guaranteed, but when they might happen. You scroll, and suddenly you see a funny video. Your dopamine goes up. You scroll again, maybe the next video is boring, but then the next one is interesting. That up and down pattern creates a powerful dopamine loop. Your brain starts thinking, the next one might be better, so you keep scrolling. Not because you're happy, but because you're seeking. Here's the important question. After 30 minutes of scrolling, do you feel more fulfilled? Most people feel mentally tired, less motivated, slightly empty. That's dopamine without satisfaction. Example 2. Buying something new. Now let's talk about shopping. Think about the last time you wanted to buy something new. A phone, shoes, clothes, a gadget. Before you buy it, you research, you compare prices, you imagine how good it will feel. During this phase, dopamine is very high. Your brain is excited about the possibility. But what happens after you buy it? For a short time, it feels good. But very quickly, that feeling fades. And then something interesting happens. You start looking for the next thing to buy. This is because dopamine drops after the reward. The brain is designed this way on purpose. If dopamine stayed high after rewards, humans would stop striving, growing, and improving. But in the modern world, this system is constantly overstimulated. That's why people can buy more and more things and still feel unsatisfied. This is called the dopamine loop. Want, get, drop, want again. Example 3. Sugar and junk food. Now let's look at food, especially sugar. When you see a dessert, dopamine increases before you even eat it. Your brain predicts pleasure. The first few bites feel great, but soon after, your energy drops. And then something strange happens. You start craving more. Not because your body needs food, but because dopamine fell below baseline. Dr. Huberman explains that frequent dopamine spikes from sugar can lower your everyday motivation. That's why people who consume a lot of sugar often feel low energy, brain fog, and lack of drive. Again, dopamine didn't give happiness, it created a cycle of craving. Example 4. video games and gambling. Video games and gambling are designed to maximize dopamine release. Random rewards, level ups, loot boxes, wins and losses. Each uncertain outcome triggers dopamine. The player isn't chasing happiness, they're chasing the next hit of anticipation. That's why people can play for hours and still feel restless afterward. The brain was activated but not fulfilled. Example 5. Hard work and long-term goals. Now let's compare all of that to something very different. Imagine training for a marathon, or learning a difficult skill, or building a business. The effort is uncomfortable, sometimes boring, sometimes frustrating. But dopamine rises slowly over time, not from instant rewards, but from progress. Every small improvement reinforces the belief that the effort is meaningful. This type of dopamine is stable. It doesn't crash your baseline. It builds resilience, focus, and confidence. This is what Dr. Huberman calls effort-based dopamine. And this is the kind of dopamine that actually improves your life. Why modern life hijacks dopamine? The problem is not dopamine itself. The problem is that modern life provides high dopamine with zero effort, all day long. Your brain wasn't designed for this. When dopamine comes too easily, the brain starts to expect it. And when expectations rise, motivation for real work disappears. That's why people say, "I know what I should do, I just don't feel like doing it." That's not laziness, that's dopamine dysregulation. Key lesson from these examples. Let's make this very clear. Dopamine-driven activities feel exciting at first, but leave you empty afterward. Effort-driven dopamine feels challenging at first, but leaves you stronger afterward. One makes you chase, the other helps you build. And once you see these patterns in your own life, you can't unsee them. In the next part, we'll talk about why high dopamine spikes can actually lower your happiness, and what Dr. Huberman suggests to regain control of your brain and your motivation.
Why too much dopamine is dangerous. At this point, you might be thinking, if dopamine gives motivation, then more dopamine should be better, right? According to Dr. Andrew Huberman, this is where many people make a critical mistake. Too much dopamine, especially frequent dopamine spikes, can actually make your life worse. The dopamine baseline explained. Your brain has something called a dopamine baseline. This baseline determines how motivated you feel, how energized you feel, how enjoyable normal life feels. When your dopamine baseline is healthy, simple things feel rewarding. Working, learning, exercising, talking to people. But dopamine is not unlimited. Dr. Huberman makes a key principle. High dopamine spikes lead to a lower dopamine baseline. In simple terms, the higher the peak, the deeper the crash. Why the brain works this way? Your brain is designed for balance. When dopamine suddenly spikes very high from social media, sugar, pornography, drugs, or constant novelty, the brain tries to protect itself. It does this by reducing dopamine receptors, lowering dopamine sensitivity. This process is called downregulation. The brain is basically saying, this level of stimulation is too much. We need to turn the volume down. The problem is, when the volume goes down, everything else feels dull. The hidden cost of high dopamine. Here's what people don't expect. When dopamine baseline drops, you don't just lose pleasure, you lose motivation, discipline, drive, willpower. Things that used to feel manageable now feel exhausting. You know what you should do, but you don't feel the energy to do it. This is why people say, "I'm not depressed, I'm just tired of everything." That's often a dopamine problem. Example, motivation collapse. Think about someone who spends hours every day scrolling social media, watching short videos, playing games, consuming constant entertainment. Their dopamine is being spiked repeatedly with zero effort required. Now compare that to real life: studying, working, exercising, building relationships. These activities release dopamine slowly, so the brain compares the two and decides, why should I work hard when I can get more dopamine instantly? This is how high dopamine destroys work ethic, not because the person is lazy, but because the brain has been overstimulated. Addiction isn't about feeling good, it's about avoiding feeling bad. When dopamine baseline is low, people don't chase dopamine for joy, they chase it to feel normal again. That's why social media becomes compulsive, sugar cravings increase, pornography becomes addictive, gaming feels impossible to stop. The activity no longer gives happiness, it just removes discomfort for a short time. And that's a dangerous cycle. Why discipline feels impossible. Many people blame themselves. I lack discipline. I'm not strong enough. But discipline is deeply connected to dopamine. When baseline dopamine is low, effort feels painful. Focus feels impossible. Long-term goals feel meaningless. This is not a moral failure. It's a biological consequence of too many dopamine spikes. The illusion of more is better. Modern culture constantly tells us more stimulation, more entertainment, more pleasure. But the brain doesn't work that way. Dr. Huberman emphasizes the brain rewards effort, not excess. When pleasure comes too easily, the brain stops valuing effort. And when effort disappears, so does purpose. The real danger of high dopamine. So let's be very clear about the danger. High dopamine spikes can lead to low motivation, emotional numbness, poor self-control, addiction, loss of meaning. Not because dopamine is bad, but because it's being used incorrectly. Dopamine is meant to be earned through effort, not injected through constant stimulation. Key takeaway: the goal is not to eliminate dopamine. The goal is to protect your dopamine baseline. Because when your baseline is healthy, work feels rewarding, growth feels exciting, life feels meaningful. In the next part, we'll talk about how Dr. Andrew Huberman suggests you restore dopamine balance and use it as a tool, not let it control your life.
What is real happiness? After understanding dopamine, how it drives desire, and how too much of it can drain your motivation, the next important question is this. If dopamine doesn't create real happiness, then what does? According to Dr. Andrew Huberman, real happiness is not a constant high. It is not excitement, it is not pleasure, and it is definitely not constant stimulation. Real happiness is something much quieter and much more stable. Happiness is not a spike. Modern culture teaches us that happiness should feel intense. Big emotions, big excitement, big pleasure. But neuroscience tells a very different story. Those intense emotional highs are usually dopamine-driven. And, as you've already learned, dopamine highs are temporary. They rise quickly and they fall quickly. Real happiness, on the other hand, is not a spike. It's a baseline. It's how you feel when nothing exciting is happening. The chemistry of real happiness. Dr. Huberman explains that long-term well-being comes from a balance of several brain chemicals, not just dopamine. Let's look at the most important ones. Serotonin, the chemical of contentment. Serotonin is associated with contentment, calm confidence, a sense of I am okay where I am. Unlike dopamine, serotonin does not push you to chase more. It allows you to appreciate what you already have. People with healthy serotonin levels often feel emotionally stable, less reactive, more satisfied with their progress. Serotonin is strongly influenced by sunlight exposure,
regular sleep, physical movement, a sense of progress over time, not instant rewards. Oxytocin, the chemical of connection. Another key component of real happiness is oxytocin. Oxytocin is released through meaningful conversations, trust, physical touch, deep relationships. This chemical creates emotional safety, belonging, a sense that you are not alone. Dr. Huberman often emphasizes that humans are social creatures. No amount of dopamine stimulation can replace genuine human connection. You can have money, success, entertainment, but without connection, happiness feels incomplete. Endorphins, the calm after effort. Endorphins are often misunderstood. They are not about excitement. They are released after physical effort, after enduring discomfort, after overcoming challenge. Endorphins create a feeling of relief, calm, quiet satisfaction. Think about how you feel after a hard workout, a long day of meaningful work, finishing something difficult. That peaceful, grounded feeling is not dopamine, it's endorphins, and it's a key part of real happiness. The role of effort in happiness. This leads to one of Dr. Huberman's most important insights. Learn to enjoy the effort, not just the reward. Why is this so important? Because effort-based activities build serotonin over time, strengthen endorphin systems, and stabilize dopamine instead of spiking it. When you tie happiness only to outcomes, money, likes, success, praise, your emotional state becomes fragile. But when you learn to enjoy the process, happiness becomes resilient. You don't need constant wins. You feel good simply by showing up and trying. Why pleasure feels empty. Many people confuse pleasure with happiness. Pleasure is short-term. Happiness is long-term. Pleasure says, that feels good right now. Happiness says, my life feels meaningful. Dopamine gives pleasure. Purpose gives happiness. And purpose almost always requires effort. A simple way to think about happiness. Dr. Huberman suggests thinking about happiness this way. Dopamine helps you pursue. Serotonin helps you appreciate. Oxytocin helps you connect. Endorphins help you endure. When all four are working together, life feels balanced. Not perfect, not exciting all the time, but meaningful. Key takeaway. Real happiness is not found by increasing stimulation. It's found by reducing unnecessary dopamine spikes, building effort-based habits, creating real connections, and allowing calm satisfaction to grow over time. Happiness is not something you chase, it's something you build. And in the next part, we'll talk about practical strategies Dr. Andrew Huberman recommends to protect your dopamine system and design a life that feels both driven and fulfilled.
How to use dopamine the right way. Now that we understand what dopamine really is and why too much of it can be dangerous, the next question becomes the most important one. How do we use dopamine correctly? Dr. Andrew Huberman is very clear about this. The goal is not to eliminate dopamine. The goal is to train your dopamine system so it works for you, not against you. Rule number 1. Reduce fast, easy dopamine. The first step is simple, but not easy. You must reduce fast dopamine. Fast dopamine comes from activities that give high stimulation, very little effort, and instant reward. Examples include social media scrolling, short-form videos, junk food and sugar, constant notifications. These activities spike dopamine very quickly and then crash it just as fast. Dr. Huberman explains that frequent dopamine spikes lower your baseline motivation. So instead of asking, "How can I feel better right now?" ask, How can I protect my motivation tomorrow? This doesn't mean you quit everything forever. It means you create boundaries. For example, no phone for the first hour of the day, no social media before work, no sugar as a reward for stress. You're not punishing yourself, you're protecting your brain. Rule number 2, build slow, effort-based dopamine. Next, you want to increase slow dopamine. This is the kind of dopamine that rises gradually, comes from effort, and strengthens your baseline over time. Dr. Huberman strongly emphasizes that dopamine should be tied to work and progress, not instant pleasure. Examples include exercise, learning a difficult skill, studying, building something over time. At first, these activities don't feel exciting, but that's the point. When dopamine is earned through effort, it doesn't crash. It teaches your brain hard things are worth doing. Over time, you start to feel motivated before the task, not because it's easy, but because your brain trusts the process. Rule number 3, learn to enjoy effort itself. This may be the most powerful shift of all. Dr. Huberman says, learn to attach dopamine to effort, not outcomes. Most people do the opposite. They say, I'll be happy when I finish. I'll relax after I succeed. I'll reward myself once it's done. This trains your brain to hate the process and only want the reward. Instead, try this mindset. Appreciate showing up. Respect the discomfort. Find meaning in trying. You don't need to love the pain, you just need to accept it as valuable. When effort itself becomes rewarding, discipline becomes natural. Rule number 4, don't stack dopamine rewards. Another key mistake people make is stacking dopamine. For example, watching videos while eating, listening to entertainment while working, scrolling immediately after finishing a task. This trains your brain that one source of dopamine is not enough. Dr. Huberman recommends keeping rewards simple and separate. Let your brain experience work, completion, calm. Not work, instant stimulation, more craving. Boredom is not dangerous, it's a reset. Finally, ask yourself one honest question. Am I using dopamine to build my life or to escape from it? Dopamine is powerful. Used correctly, it helps you grow, learn, improve, create purpose. Used incorrectly, it keeps you distracted, restless, and unsatisfied. Dr. Huberman often reminds us, your brain is always learning. Every habit teaches it what matters. So choose habits that tell your brain, effort matters, progress matters, my future matters. Final takeaway. Dopamine is not your enemy, but it is not your comfort chemical either. It is a tool. When you reduce fast dopamine, build slow dopamine, attach dopamine to effort, respect boredom and discomfort, you don't just feel better, you become stronger, more focused, and more fulfilled. And that's how dopamine was meant to work.
So let's bring everything together. Dopamine is not the happiness hormone. It was never meant to make you feel calm, satisfied, or fulfilled. Dopamine is the hormone of desire. It pushes you to chase, to pursue, to want more. And that's not a bad thing. Dopamine is what helps humans grow, improve, and move forward. But when dopamine is misunderstood, when it's triggered too often, too easily, and without effort, it stops working for you, and it starts controlling you. That's when motivation drops. That's when discipline feels impossible. That's when life feels busy but empty. Real happiness doesn't come from dopamine highs. It comes from balance, from effort that builds meaning, from progress you can respect, from relationships that create connection, from calm satisfaction that doesn't disappear overnight. Dr. Andrew Huberman reminds us that a good life is not about constant pleasure. It's about learning to enjoy effort, protecting your dopamine baseline, and choosing habits that build your future, not just distract you from the present. So here's the question I want you to think about. What is one source of fast dopamine that you can reduce or remove from your life today? Not forever, just enough to give your brain space to reset. Because when you learn to control dopamine, you don't just feel better, you become stronger, more focused, and more in control of your life. If this video helped you understand your brain better, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video.